G'day and welcome to a special episode of Kochie's Business Builders, where we'll be taking a deeper look at the issues facing small business owners in 2023. And leadership is such a hot topic in Australian business right now. Why does leadership matter so much? Well, they say culture trickles down from the top. So if you want a successful business, no matter how big or small, then you need to be looking at more than just your numbers. A man who understands that more than most is Shane Hatton. Shane is an expert in leadership communication. He's an author, keynote speaker, and business coach. And in his day job, he helps leaders communicate, connect, and collaborate more effectively in order to bring out the best in those they lead. He's also the facilitator of a fantastic course on Cuppa TV. It's called So Now You're a Leader, that is designed to help business leaders thrive and survive in their roles. Shane, thanks for joining us.
Thanks so much for having me.
Tell us about how you became a leadership expert. What's your background in this area?
It's a very eclectic background. I would say it's a mixture of not-for-profit, government, education, all kinds of different roles in leadership, but then always kind of wanting to be in business. And about 5.5 years ago, I went into business, ultimately trying to help people navigate some of the complexities that come with navigating from being part of a team to then carrying the responsibility of leading a team.
And small business owners often think, hey, this leadership stuff is just for big business, isn't it? It's not. It's leadership is so important no matter how many employees you have.
Leadership influences the entire organisation. It's felt, or the impact of that's felt right through the organisation, whether that's you and 1-2 other people on your team, or whether it's a team of thousands.
Yep. Are leaders born, or can you learn leadership?
I think everyone has the capacity for leadership. I mean, we're very rarely born with a lot of things, but we develop the capacity over time. I think leadership's just like any other muscle. You flex and you strengthen, you build over time.
So what makes a great leader?
That's a good question. It's very subjective based on who your leader is, but I would say generally speaking, leaders make the lives of the people around them better in the pursuit of something bigger.
As a small business owner though, we do lots of things. We're doing the accounting, we're doing the customer relationship. How do we prioritise learning leadership skills or focusing on what makes a good leader?
I think over time you start to learn that part of the prioritisation of a leader is to get out of doing everything and start to empower the people around them, get out of the transactional day-to-day and a little bit more into the strategic roles of the job.
Okay, so what do we do wrong? What are the pitfalls?
I mean, the pitfalls are typically being pulled down into the detail, feeling like you need to be in everything rather than feeling like you're across everything.
Like what? Give me an example.
I mean, some examples could be, getting pulled down into the how rather than the why. If you think about a leader's role, it's to set the vision of the organisation, it's to set the direction and the strategy.
So from what you're telling me, that's almost self-discipline on our part as a business owner, is it? Being aware we've got to be better leaders and taking the time out of your day, carving it out to say, right, these are the questions I've got to answer to put into place in my organisation.
Yeah, it's a huge amount of humility, isn't it? Like, I mean, the humility to say, I don't have all the answers, even though I've built my business off of me and off of my expertise. Now I'm starting to grow a team and there's other people that might be smarter in some areas than me.
So what are the fundamental skills that make a great leader?
I always think about,
give us a couple that will spark us into activity.
I think the big three, if you think about it like playing a game of football, what do you need? You need to know what game you're playing, you need to know what the plan is to win the game, and you need to know how to play together as a team. And I think the big three for any leader is, number one, are you good at setting the vision for the organisation and where you're going? It's what game are we playing? Bringing together a team is like, are we playing AFL or are we playing NRL? Because that game determines the rules that we play by. Then being able to connect that big picture vision down to daily strategic objectives. And what does it look like to play the game? How do we know whether we've kicked a goal? How do we know whether we're winning? And then finally, which is probably the most overlooked part, is do we know how to play together well as a team? What's our culture like within our organisation? So if you think of those three, it's strategic direction and vision, it's strategic goals and outcomes, and then it's culture of the organisation.
According to the 2023 CEMS report, which surveyed leaders from 70 countries around the globe, resilience and empathy are vital characteristics of successful leaders post-pandemic. So if empathy, resilience and compassion are essential to survive and thrive in business in 2023, how can business owners harness their empathy and compassion to lead their teams? Shane, where do we start?
I think we have to start with this idea that empathy is some kind of a fluffy skill. It's soft, but it's not fluffy. It is hard, it's complex, it takes a lot of effort and intention. And I read something recently that 7 out of 10 CEOs struggle to show empathy because they fear that they'll be less respected as a result of it. And so I still think there is this overwhelming sense that empathy is this soft skill that makes you weak, or that it's a fluffy skill, but it's not. It's a really strong characteristic of leadership.
Okay, so explain what empathy is.
Yeah, I mean, empathy is different to sympathy. It's not the same. Sympathy feels for somebody, empathy feels with somebody. Someone explained it to me, it's like I cross the table and I sit with you on your side of the table in your experience. And so if you think about what that can bring to a business, it brings a sense of perspective, it brings an intuition of the unspoken conversations in a room or of customers. It's being able to get outside of yourself and experience what it's like to be on the other side of you.
So give me an example. No names, no pack drill, but someone you've worked with that has shown great empathy and how they've done it.
There's a very public example that I think was given during the pandemic, and there was a moment, I don't know if you remember, when in New Zealand at the time there was an alarm system that went off through people's mobile phones, and the Prime Minister at the time, Jacinda Ardern, went live on Facebook, and she was sat down having just kind of put one of her children to bed, and she had this moment where she led with, she said, I know what it's like being a mother and to get that warning signal pop up on your phone, and I understand that must have been very frightening for a lot of people, and I want to explain to you what this was all about. And for a moment she put herself on the other side of that, and it really, really connected with people.
Okay, that's a really good example. Now, the other strength of leaders is resilience. How do you build resilience as a leader, and what does that mean?
I mean, we've got, I think, by and large, the last few years has built a lot of resilience in people. I think by definition of the word resilience is about being able to snap back into something. So when something gets stretched or when it gets pulled out, it snaps back. And I think we've seen a lot of businesses across Australia and around the world who've been stretched to the last few years, and they've been able to bounce back with a real sense of resilience to that. I think the thing that is more important, as well as resilience, is also adaptability, which is the ability not just to snap back, but also to bounce forward through all that.
People talk a lot about intelligent empathy and resilience coming through. Distinguish that for us.
Yeah, I mean, it's all, I guess the big conversations around emotional intelligence, right? And I think the people we're interacting with, they're not artificial intelligence. We're not dealing with AI day to day, even though it's kind of becoming a big part of our world. We're dealing with people, and people are very complex human beings. They've got emotional needs. And so empathy helps us to be able to connect with that human level, and that emotional intelligence allows us to connect at a human level.
Okay. What do you say to business owners who say, that's all terrific? That's great, the empathy and the resilience. I'm trying to earn a buck here, run my business. I've got my bookkeeper wanting me to do this. I've got the sales team, customers on my back. How do I carve out time to develop myself in this area?
Well, I think it's in every conversation. It doesn't have to be, I'm going to set aside some time to learn to be empathetic. I think it's a small thought in the back of your mind in every conversation to ask, what would an empathetic response to this look like? And how could I start to tweak my responses to that? And what I would say to that is, you don't have to solve everyone's problems. You just have to acknowledge them. Acknowledge that they're there. And in doing so, you can help connect with the people that sit across from you.
Today we're chatting with Shane Hatton all about things leadership and how it can impact your small business. Now, Shane, one thing we haven't touched on is team culture. The culture of a business can have a big impact on the success of it. But where does it start from?
I mean, culture starts in every part of the business. It's ultimately led from the top of the organisation. There has to be some kind of a pin in the map that says this is where we're going, this is the culture we're aspiring to create. But to bring it to life has to be lived out through every layer of the organisation.
But every organisation has a different culture. So how do you determine what culture is best for your organisation?
Most often what people are referring to when they talk about culture is our collective behavioural norms, which is what is the way that we want to do things as a team? And that looks very different. You could be in education, or you could be in the military, or you could be in not-for-profit, and you could take a set of behavioural norms from one and they wouldn't translate to another. Now, there's some definitely behaviours that are not acceptable and not productive behaviours, but typically the question we want to ask ourselves is this the way that we want to do things as a team, as we bring our collective effort and energy?
Okay, so because there's a service culture, there can be an innovation culture, there can be a collaborative culture. So do you aim for a mix of all, or do you focus on one or another specifically?
Yeah, I mean, you can do all things. You probably just can't do all things at the same time.
Yeah.
And so if you want to build the culture, it's about establishing what are the 2 to 3 priorities for us right now that are going to help set our business up for the next 12 to 18 months, and how do we create a collective effort behind that?
So give me the steps that you need to take.
Pragmatically, there's 2 big conversations you need to have with your team. The first is to have a really explicit conversation about expectations, which is what do we expect of one another on this team? And as you start to have that conversation, you'll find that there are some themes. Maybe it's about collaboration, or maybe it's about innovation.
But how do you build an environment for that? Sort of, say you want an innovation culture. What do you need to put around the business to promote that innovation?
Yeah, I mean, if you wanted to create an innovation culture, you'd want to start by seeing innovative behaviours. And I think there's a distinction. We often say we want an innovative culture, but what we more often want is an improvement culture, which is I want to do things better rather than I want to do things different. I would say your innovation culture is determined by your culture of failure and your culture of change. So we want to actually celebrate behaviours that when we see failure, we don't punish failure, but we celebrate that people tried.
And connection between staff?
I loved this thought I read a few years back in Tim Duggan's book called Killer Thinking, which is all about hippos in the room, the highest paid person's opinion. So if you want to create an environment where people can connect with each other as a person who's the highest paid person's opinion in the room, taking a little bit less time to speak first and allowing others to speak. So little things in behaviours that demonstrate the culture that you'd like to create.
Australian businesses are facing a continued skills and people shortage. So upskilling your staff and cultivating a team of problem solvers should be high on any business owner's agenda. But how can we make sure we're harnessing our employees best? Shane, sometimes we can be so focused on the day-to-day that we miss out on development opportunities.
I heard someone once say this quote, which was, you can't take on next year's battles with this year's army. And often we get so caught up in the day-to-day things that we're doing that we're not actually preparing for where our business needs to be in 12 to 18 months' time. And a big area of that is what skills do we require for our team in 12 to 18 months' time that they don't yet have right now.
So do you do that in consultation with each individual employee?
Well, I think it's always best to ask the question of your people, where are the gaps right now? What could we be doing better to help you get the skills required to tackle our strategic goals?
Do you do that internally or externally? Do you build a program of skills development for, if you like, a professional development program for each staff member?
There's 2 ways you can do it. It's going to depend on the size of your organisation. If you're a relatively small business, that's a lot easier to do individually with people, to have those individual conversations. But the big thing is where are our gaps in our capabilities that are going to help us deliver on our strategy?
Okay, and is it in reverse, saying to a staff member, hey, these are the gaps I think are in your skills. Are you prepared to upskill and grow with the business?
Yeah, I definitely think there's an element of what are the things that you as a business owner, as a leader, can see that they can't. So you know the next 12 to 18 months, maybe even the next 5 years of the business, what will be required of people.
A lot of it comes back on the business owner and developing your skills. How do you constantly do that? Because this is an area where a lot of business owners are uncomfortable. They don't know what direction to go in. How can you build, if you like, a team or a resource base around you that helps you as the business owner?
I think the best time and effort and investment is ongoing conversations with people rather than taking off big chunks of skills development, just going, hey, what's one thing we could do in the next 90 days that would help you kind of feel more confident in your role, more capable in your role. So little things over time rather than big chunks of development and investment.
But where can the business owner go for, if you like, thought-provoking stuff, direction, sort of step-by-step guides that this is what you should build into your schedule, your calendar every week to make sure you're focused on culture, that you're focused on almost reminders on empathy, of skills development of staff?
Yeah, I mean, that was part of the big reason why we put together this So Now You're a Leader program, is to help people identify some of the pathways that go from being a technical expert or a business owner to leading people. But I mean, even just getting around other business owners and being in the space to have conversations, go, hey, what's your challenges right now? And share some of the learning and experience.
So that could be your local chamber of commerce,
yes,
or
absolutely.
whatever, sharing ideas. Tell us about the program, though, that you're involved in with Kappa. What's involved there?
I mean, I get on flights a lot, and you find that you get really good at the travelling process. But if I said, hey, we're going to put you behind the controls of the plane, now you're flying the plane, I certainly wouldn't want to be on that plane. No one wants to be on that plane with me. Yeah. And we often find that shift from technical expert to people leader is actually quite challenging. So part of that was walking through a program, working through some of those shifts of what's required of me to make that jump from someone who's just on the plane to someone who's behind the controls.
Okay, all right. All the details down below to click through into Shane's program there to take us step by step. Shane Hatton, really appreciate your time today. Thank you.
Thank you so much.